Hello and welcome back to the transfer show here in Anfield Index. I'm Trev Downey here in my field in beautiful rural Ireland. Of course, I'm joined by the main man when it comes to transfer talk on Anfield Index. That's my mate and yours, Mr. Dave Davis. Lots to talk about today, Dave, to say the least. Some good, some bad, some indifferent. Let's get cracking, I think. Probably the best thing we can do, just get straight into it because there's lots to talk about. And we could start off with some goalkeeper talk because the lad that we've christened Joe has come in the door for about 1.5 million. Alisson was saying things about contract and running the full length of his potential contract, his extension, or the extra year that the club can activate. And we've heard big news about Jaros being in demand with the high-profile Dutch club. So maybe walk us through these keeper stories to start off.
Yeah, a lot of people have almost dismissed this a little bit, but I see this as really good news because we've alluded to this previously. We knew that the Saudis had, touched base, shall we say, with Alisson's camp and seeing, would he consider it, that big money move over there. And there's been question marks with the changes at the club, with Arne Slot coming in at the summer. There was a lot of uncertainty around Alisson, wasn't there? But it seems to be really positive, and he was put up by Brazil. And as he says there on the screen, he was asked directly about his contract. I have 1 year of contract left on 1 more year on a club option. They will probably exercise this option. Too fucking right they will, Alisson. Let's make no mistake about that. And I think about what I have in hand to do a great job. It's a decisive moment in my career when a World Cup is coming, which is all good for us because he's thinking, have a good season at Liverpool, make sure I'm Brazil #1 for that World Cup. Happy days. Also, the extra year. The thing I like about this, Trev, it just feels like those elite players that we have, and we've got 3 elite players, as we know, Alisson, Van Dijk and Salah. This feels now like we've got them all for another 2 years, doesn't it? The backbone of the team. That's a massive positive. Let's not undersell this one little bit at all. And then, the little Joe's cousin, Pesci, he's in there. And it was funny that the interview comments that he gave, that not trying to be disrespectful, but he plays for a Hungarian club, Puskás Academia, who probably a lot of people were like, who are they when they first announced in the club and all that? But it was interesting. He talked about when he was speaking to the club and the representatives, how much data they had on him, how much detail and analysis. So it proper sounds like the laptop geeks are back and in full operation, aren't they? Doing their bits and looking for those gems, looking for those bargains. So that was positive as well. And then Jaros, Vitslav, to be fair, he was third choice last year. He's one of those. He's too good to be a third choice goalkeeper, really. He's talented. We saw that in the few games he played. And Johnny Heitinger's trying to bring him to Ajax with him, isn't he? Talk that there's a loan with an option possibly there. But the info we've got around Jaros is there's a lot of inquiries from quite a few European clubs. So that makes sense for him to go out, doesn't it? Whether it be perm and on loan, they've got Harvey Davis that can step up and qualify as homegrown. You might, even if you've got a third choice, want young Pesci to get minutes on occasions or experience on the bench there as well, because the reports are from his agent that he will be involved with the first team on occasion. So, considering Kelleher went last week, wasn't it? I didn't think we'd be talking about keepers as much, but positive all round for me.
I don't see a bad thing in that. You've mentioned Harvey Davies, who's lurking around there and is highly rated. I think the move for Jaros makes perfect sense. And it may make sense for the club as well, given Mamardashvili in now and Alisson wanting to stay around. You could have quite a disgruntled Mamardashvili if he's not getting an occasional game, or he thinks of himself as #1. He does. So I think it's all very, very healthy. And this new kid in that our Palantir boys have been compiling information on, tremendous work. I think it's all very good. And we wanted to start there because it's actually something definite that's happened, as opposed to the big stories, which are Wirtz and Kerkez. And that's why most people will be listening this evening. We're not going to keep you dangling any longer. We'll get there. But just to be fair, don't shoot any messengers here, because we can only tell you what we know. And we know on this probably as much as everyone else does, Dave, because it has been a hurry up and wait situation. I think it's quite revealing as to the mental stability of a lot of humans who are really rattled by the fact that it's not over the line. You can see the angst coming out in rival fans online. It's wild to watch, with their belittling of Kerkez, or they're sneering at Liverpool actually spending money theoretically. Of course, we all just want to see them do that. I heard you on Big Decisions earlier on talking about how, we could potentially be in a situation where this first little window's over and we've fired 200 million at the wall. And I think you and I would both be very happy if that is the case. What is it that we know is the very latest and most trustworthy info on the Wirtz and Kerkez thing?
Do you know what? With the Wirtz one especially, I'm reminded of the parable of the Jerusalem housewife that was removed from the Bible at the Council of Nicaea, because it involved loaves and fishes being put in front of Jesus and Jesus studying them carefully, and a Jerusalem housewife just shouting at from the back, "Will you fucking get on with it?" And then people were expecting things to sort of accelerate from there, weren't they? And even this today, you have to laugh at this a little bit. Do you remember how it was? We've had 99% done and we've had very close. Today, from Florian Plettenberg, we now advance to very, very close. So, like, literally, the adjectives are still there, people. We're waiting like you, aren't we, for news? And I kind of like her at this a little bit, because one scan of Twitter at times today has seen planes being tracked from Copenhagen, Cologne, Berlin, and all that type of thing. So them boys are doing the good, honest work, which is funny. People are looking for like Bournemouth, Chelsea, but all sorts of things are going on. Like you, we're all waiting. I suppose that the big thing to say is, even digging today, all the news seems to be, it's just expected. It's still when, not if. That, we're just being honest on what we're being told on that. But maybe the other thing, as much as we've talked about window one, I don't think Liverpool give a shit too much, because, to be honest, window one's for the Club World Cup teams, isn't it, really? They need to get it done so they can take them players over to the US and that tournament. If this does go into Wednesday, Thursday, whatever, I don't think Liverpool really give a shit. They're not really concerned about that PR. I mean, I did find it interesting that a few were saying today, like, this is another Caicedo, this is another Zubimendi. It's really not. Caicedo, we came in at the last minute too late, where they'd already agreed the deal with Chelsea. We didn't do any due diligence or anything like that. Zubimendi, it was a bit new for Richard Hughes, wasn't it? And he tried his best. This is different. We know we've had Wirtz over. We've had his family over. They've given their word. Wirtz wants to come to us, clearly. That's why he's turned down City, Bayern, and all the others. So it is completely different. And I totally get people going, this has been going on 87,000 years, because it does feel like it's dragged. But when it does land, let's not let that sour the moment when Liverpool could potentially spend 200 million in one hit, Trev. It's still going to be a massive positive.
Yeah, I think the relevance of this first window ending will come into a conversation in a little while. But on this one, like you say, it's kind of irrelevant. The only thing it's relevant to is our mental health and people wanting to see these things happen. And listen, I don't critique anyone for being frustrated, because it's like having something like lovely dangled in front of you, and you're just in that kind of kind of holding it backstage. So look, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. The fact that there's, as you say, just these increasingly extra bits of very, very close, definitely close, so close. All done bar the shouting, as good as done. All these phrases you see, I think that's actually just adding to people's irritation levels, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, Dave. And it doesn't, let's be honest, it doesn't make it easy for us having to come out here. And I'm certainly not justifying anything, but I do think you mentioned Dickie Hughes earlier on. And to be fair to him, I think old Mountain Nonce is about to embarrass a second club. Because he's clearly a flaky chap. And so I kind of feel like maybe we need to let him off the hook with that. We went all in on this guy, and it turns out he's quite flaky. So I'm just enthused that we're linked with these guys.
Yeah,
it would be a tremendous amount. Let's not put too fine a point on it. It would be a tremendous amount of egg on the face, Dave. We should acknowledge that, shouldn't we? It would be tremendously embarrassing at this point, given recent pursuits and failures, if the Wirtz thing was to not get done. That has to be acknowledged. Wherever people are with the Kerkez thing, I think some people are with the Kerkez thing. That's a lot of money for that kid. So maybe they wouldn't be quite as broken up. But I'm really, really optimistic we get both of them. I love the strategy. But again, it's going to come back, man, to something we need to talk about later on, about where these transfer funds are coming from. And we know funds come from sales. And whether he likes it or not, sadly, it looks like Harvey Elliott's going to be one of those guys in our window, in our shop window. Several comments from the kids seem to suggest it. What's the latest with that? Because we know for a fact you've had it stood up that there are several clubs, Premier League clubs, genuinely interested in him.
Yeah, we mentioned this for a number of weeks, and I get it. He's a popular player. He's got a unique skill set for Liverpool. There's a lot of what you call, and I don't mean this in a derogatory sense, Harvey fanboys, aren't there? There's nothing wrong. People like players. That's not being critical at all. But it's quite clear Arne Slot doesn't fancy him. And he did an interview that came out as weirdly like an old 10:30 embargo last night. Lewis Steele and a few others had the comments, and then the videos dropped as well. And I'd well encourage people, if they're uncertain from what I'm saying, just to watch this video, because he genuinely seems like gutted, Harvey Elliott, as he's talking, almost like on the verge of tears a little bit, which you don't want to see him upset, but I like how much it means to him. He clearly wants to do well at Liverpool, but he's being honest in the fact, and he uses specific terminology where he says, me and my team have had a discussion. Now, you know the team's his dad and his agent, isn't it? There's no doubts about that, about what's happening. And he also speaks about, I'm going to be 23 soon. I can't afford to waste years. It's a short career, which also answers the question as in, would he be happy doing another season of what happened last season? It's clear the answer is no. He wants to play now, and it's understandable. And the reason he's, you don't want to be cynical, but let's just say he's in the England under-21 Euro squad, isn't he? And they play their first game in 3 days' time, Trev. So it's a good little shop window time for him, isn't it, there as well, just to remind people that he is available at the same time. There is Premier League interest as well. I mean, Wirtz is set to come. There's other midfielders. It's not being derogatory about Harvey. I think everyone is now going to be absolutely astonished if Harvey Elliott is at Liverpool by the start of next season.
Yeah, it seems that he will be one of the people who will be adding to that list of incomings that will hopefully offset the outgoings. And just on that, Dave, and I see there's a lot of chat on the side there in the sidebar, and I understand that like people are all different levels of annoyed or patient. Everyone's all across that spectrum. But I would say to you that I don't think it's very helpful. Someone said about, I wish we were just quiet about it, like, Edwards used to operate. I don't think it's very helpful to have these constant reports that are saying, the latest Liverpool slightly increased offer has been rejected. The latest Liverpool offer has been, it just feels, doesn't it, like it's an unnecessary bit of theatre that we could all do without. I don't understand what possible benefit there is for anyone in this. You know that it's going to absolutely send lads wild if it ends up being a thing that it doesn't get done, because the narrative has already been established that Liverpool are lowballing with each offer.
Yeah.
But surely, Dave, that's a negotiation. I just don't think every step of that negotiation should be thrown out there to the public. I don't think it's helpful at all.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I also think, and it's funny, we've got Plettenberg on the screen. Well, Mr. Wirtz embarrassed him with the number 10 claim, doesn't he? So that was proven to be false and nonsense. So I think sometimes, not trying to say people are outright whatevers, but people have got column inches to fill, haven't they? Or clicks to grab, however you want to put it on that. So that comes into a factor. What I also like about our business so far, there's two bits that have really stood out for me above anything, Trev. Number one, until it happened, no one had Wirtz coming over to Liverpool, did they, on the plane and the secret meeting until after it happened and the pitch. So Liverpool can still do stuff in the shadows. And the second thing that proved that as well is, do you remember as it came out this week from David Ornstein and a few others, that Arne Slot went to the south of France to see Rayan Cherki, didn't he, before they committed to this as well. So Liverpool can still move in the shadows, which also tells me a little bit that I think some of these reports, they're not really that bothered, or they may control how they come out as well, just to make it seem like it is maybe a bit more dramatic than it is. And also what's interesting is, if you think about the German and the UK reports, Paul Joyce and the others, they always seem just a little bit behind the German reports, don't they? The way it comes out like 1 or 2 days later. Those are the three things that have stood out for me. The other thing is to say, it makes it interesting for us to discuss. I get the way people can be frustrated by it. I totally understand that. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. But as long as Wirtz and Kerkez are at the AXA for the 1st of July, this will all be forgotten soon enough.
Yeah, that's it. And like I said, this first transfer window closure becomes relevant to our last Liverpool story. Not so much this one at all, if we're being honest, much as we'd like it to be. But looking ahead to the next window, and then we'll actually have a quick word on Konate before we go to that last story about, what might be getting quite pressing with this window. We're hoping that Kerkez and Wirtz join Frimpong and that we have this incredible opening to our bit of business. Yeah. Window 2 is going to be dependent 100% on how many we can sell and at what price. But there is a lot of business that still needs doing. There are a lot of areas of the team that still need addressing. Like, if we're being 100% honest, an impressive left-sided attacker was not top of everybody's list, So this is quite interesting, because there were screaming areas elsewhere, like right down the middle of the attack, like probably a centre half, if the business that's looking like might get done in that department. What do we know so far about potential window 2 business, or what can we say about it, really, given the fact that we don't know yet what our budget is, because we don't know yet what kind of money can be earned from what players we can sell?
It's funny there, John P saying, please don't mention a certain Newcastle winger. Okay, I will try my best when we talk about window 2 then. So, yeah, I think the premise of window 1, and it may run into window 2 or a little bit longer, but I think no one had us spending, as you said, the best part of 200 million. No one had us before the summer, because people were always, we've heard big summer, massive spend before, but it looks like a realistic possibility. So then, as you move to window 2, we're still a smartly run club, quote unquote. So the books have got to be balanced, haven't they? You've got to sell players and look to move players on. We know Arne Slot is not interested in working with 25, 26. He's been clear on that. That's not how he's going to operate. It's a small squad where he wants everyone. And it's interesting, I think, from all the stories, all the things we've seen, quite understandably, we all kind of thought and were hoping still there was going to be a Saudi golden goose for us again, didn't we, Trev? Thinking that, come on, we know the players. We've seen all the Diaz reports, as we talked about last show just gone, and Al Nassr coming in, so we'll wait to see if that comes to fruition. And Darwin had been talked about, and even today, everyone's been manifesting this a little bit, haven't they? Because, when Victor Osimhen rejects Al Hilal, and we'll talk about the Saudi situation, everyone's like, this is it. They're going to come back in for Darwin, and people jumped on these stories. I'm going to be honest, from sort of digging into it all day, absolutely nada reliable that the Saudis are in for Darwin in this window one at all. Just, I would love to be able to tell you people, this is bang on what's on the screen. We're going to get the hit. This is going to be reinvested. No, nothing on that at all. In fact, to the contrary. And being honest, the latest bit of digging, it kind of goes back to what we said a few weeks ago. Do you remember we mentioned that Atletico were in for him, Diego Simeone? It does seem that maybe Darwin might well have his heart on a return to Spain, where his family is, where he's played before, which also then means in terms of, yeah, you could say it could be a sale, but we know if it is Atletico Madrid, they're going to give us a lot less than Al Hilal or a Saudi team would. So that comes into the mix then as well. We talked about Elliott being sold, so you replenish your funds there. The other one is Luis Diaz, isn't it? And again, this sits on kind of not a knife edge, but you're just wondering now because Barca came in, as we talked about last show, and did a stupid offer. So we said, no, go away. Liverpool purposely put all those stories in the press to be like, we're not messing around with this low balling. We're prepared to keep him. And by the way, we're not going to give Luis Diaz a contract renewal either, just to be absolutely crystal clear. And then, I don't know if I've got it up, actually. I've not got this one. But Diaz talked about it, didn't it, in the press conference, saying, you know, we'll look at options. We're seeing what's on the market, a renewal. He mentioned that it's not coming. So Luis Diaz now has a choice. You stay at Liverpool, you will not get a renewal. I get Barcelona's your first choice, but they're messing around with stupid offers and they're not going to offer anything like the Saudis are or what we deem to be Luis Diaz's true value. So Liverpool are not going to budge on that unless the actual money comes from Barcelona, which you wouldn't bet a single penny on, would you, in all honesty, right now? So that comes into the mix. So you're hoping, put the Saudi bid on the table, and then he's got a call to make, hasn't he? Stay at Liverpool. You probably prefer to do that in a footballing sense, but no renewal. Go to Saudi. You don't really want to do that in the footballing sense, but your wages are probably going to get trebled, aren't they? And you'll get that contract you've been seeking for a while. But it's just interesting that almost at the start of the summer, the outline looked like we could do business. And Saudis were going to be our golden goose, weren't they, for Diaz and Nunez? And all of a sudden now, there's question marks against both of those all of a sudden. And now you're just wondering, Liverpool will have contingencies. It's not like this derails everything completely. But you just wonder what the impact will be, the knock-on effect, when we get to window 2, don't you?
You absolutely do. And window 2 is going to be completely and utterly dictated by what available funds there are. And I think it's important here that we just talk about what you and I spoke about briefly before the mics went live on this one, is we know that Darwin was willing to make the move to Saudi at Christmas, but things have changed quite dramatically for Darwin. He has that medal in his pocket now. Granted, it was diminishing returns from him in a spectacular fashion post his being forced to stay when he wanted to make that move because the club couldn't get their target of Osimhen in. Things have changed, and there's no way Atleti's interest hasn't turned his head. Luis Diaz is in a very similar position in that he will think of himself as a certain level of footballer, like no doubt Darwin Nunez will, and he will want to play in a league that reflects that. Where we thought we might have something going for us was how many people can say no to that massive bag of cash. And it looks now, from the latest things, that neither of our two boys are exactly biting the hands off anyone. And as you said, the interest is not even being necessarily put forward from any of these big clubs. So I think, whereas if we were being honest, if the big move for Darwin Nunez to a Saudi club was to happen, it probably needs to happen in the next 24 hours. I don't mean to sound alarmist, but it's probably going to be from a club who's looking to get him involved early. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's one of those, you never know for definite, but I'm leaning towards that, because if you look at the Saudi clubs, that Al Hilal, they're going to be in the Club World Cup. They were clearly looking for a big name striker. That's why they tried for Osimhen and others, as we'll come to later on in the Saudi section. So you feel like, and it was Al Hilal that had been mentioned for Darwin, isn't it? So you thought that seemed the move, that seemed the right one. Then the other clubs that have been mentioned with Darwin, the only other Saudi one was Al Nassr, the one that Ronaldo's at. And to be honest, because of that move fell through, they bought Juan Duran, didn't they, from Aston Villa for about 75 million. They've got Ronaldo. So, I mean, I won't pretend I know anything like the formation or anything that Al Nassr plays, but it's hard to see them wanting Darwin. So all of a sudden, we're not going to pretend to be any Saudi football experts, but we're not naming a team anymore that seems to be in for him, doesn't he? Or have him as an urgent need. And there's no Club World Cup to go for it at the same time. So you're just a little bit like struggling to see it. And maybe others know another team that have been linked with him. But being honest, from the digging we've done, those two clubs, it's looking not impossible, but just less and less likely, isn't it?
Yeah, and therefore the potential for Liverpool incoming cash is very much reduced if those moves don't happen. And I think people need to get their heads around that, because there's too many kind of football manager types making comments on a regular basis as if they're just deals that you do sort of in the ether. These are men who have their own interests and desires and passions and ambitions. And they're two very good footballers. And a lot of people would say, Dave, that if the Luis Diaz situation doesn't work out in terms of us forcing the hand of some club to either pay up, or you stay here, you don't get your move, and you don't get your renewed or your improved conditions, you just see out your contract. A lot of people would say, well, Diaz at 50 grand a week for the next 2 years is very good value, and maybe the club could consider doing that. But of course, the human aspect is, what kind of a human have you got left there who's playing for a club he feels he's undervalued at, not respected at? What's the rainbow at the end of that tunnel for him? There's, so these are very complicated, ongoing situations. But like you said, man, it's going to have a massive impact one way or the other on our budget. Another thing that's going to have a massive impact on our budget is how much money we're paying in wages. And the Ibrahima Konate wages were the ones that most people were focusing on, because they were the ones in the news from when we started doing these shows, actually towards the end of the season. We had somewhat positive news, or at least not negative news, or words from the player himself that could be interpreted in a positive fashion if you wish to. However, there doesn't seem to be any great updates, and we know that our lot don't mind waiting till the very, very last moment to do deals when it comes to contracts. So maybe this is another one we can't get too upset about yet.
Because it goes all the way back to a couple of weeks ago, doesn't it? When Konate spoke to say his agent had gone into the club and they've spoken with the club. So we all kind of hope for little developments where we were thinking like, come on then. What's happening, and trying to dig around on this, because it's still completely silent, isn't it? Konate's away on international duty. And being honest, the only bit I got in it, that nothing really seemed to move with the talks at all, in terms of his agent's been quite clear that Real Madrid have been in his ear. PSG, as we said, have been in his ear. So if you do want him to stay, Liverpool, pony up and pony up hard type of thing. There doesn't seem to be really any bending. And I suppose in one way, not good for us, but I get it from Konate, because if you have got, as we said before, Real Madrid in your ear, if you have got PSG in your ear, promising you all these riches, free transfers, then you're not going to settle for maybe a far lower contract, even though, and quite rightly, Liverpool will see it as, listen, we're going to more than double your wages here. That's what you're asking for. But I get it. The only wonder now is, and I'm being honest, from all the noises, and I want to be wrong on this as I'm saying it, please, people. We don't want to ever bring you bad news, but there's not really good noises around this particularly. So you start to get to wonder, to the point, do Liverpool as we've talked about, sell now, but then PSG and the others will know they can lowball it with a year left. And what option have Liverpool got if they demand a sale now? Which then leaves them to the other option of, do they run Konate down for a free? We've seen them do that. Think, well, if we get another year off a top quality centre half and a title, everyone's happy and we move on. All we can say on Konate is, and again, hope to be wrong, hope something develops with this, but the noises from that agent meeting don't seem to have moved anything on at all, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it just looks like the same story as before. And again, we are not people to preach patience. That's not what we do. You do lose your head if you want. But it's probably not going to be any good because they just seem to work to the beat of their own drum here on these things. I'm going to queue up our European chat. Do you want to acknowledge our 3 super chatters there, Dave, just before we move to Europe?
Yeah, absolutely. So we said about John P and the Newcastle winger. I managed to get away with that, John. Daryl, if you put the super chat in there, mate, Daryl Merry, there's nothing actually showing apologies. So if you do put the question on the screen, I will put that on. But Tam has put a bit in there. We realised how cheap Turkey was too late. I think we are looking for a way out. Edwards just signed pretty quickly once it's public. Lavia all over again. So it's all about opinions. And I've got to be honest, I don't agree with anything like that because as the reporting came out from Ornstein and the others, Arne Slot went to the south of France to speak to Turkey before they made the move for Wirtz. They were looking at options, weren't they? And we've talked about contingencies that way. They've just decided, quite rightly, to go for Wirtz because he's a better player. So just to be clear, if City could have got Wirtz, they would have done. They've just then put out the PR to say, oh, he's too much. Remember, this is a club that spent 100 million on Jack Grealish. So I don't think we're looking for a way out either there. I think we're just trying to get deals done. And Lavia was the bit of the panic, wasn't it? Once we couldn't get Caicedo, so go to plan B publicly. And we got embarrassed on that a second time because Chelsea had all that money waiting to go on a mad, I think 8-9 year deal he got, wasn't it, in the end? So that's what swayed it. So just personally, all opinions, but yeah, struggling to agree with that one, to be honest.
And just to go back to the Konate thing, one question I had for you just before we move to Europe. I think somebody said it in the chats there, but it was something that crossed my mind as well. It's gone very quiet, hasn't it, in the Liverpool links to defenders? Probably because all the focus is on the big name of Wirtz, and Kerkez has been such a high-profile link as well. And before that, Frimpong was. But with the Konate situation the way it is, with Jarell Quansah not 100% definitely going to be at the club, because they might fancy him an asset, with the fact that Joe Gomez may be on the move as well. You add Konate into that, we have to be in the market for a defender, you would imagine, and there's very little, isn't there?
Yeah, it's a tough one, the centre-back situation, because Quansah's just about to play for England in the Euro under-21s, isn't he? So he's got a month there, but if they do want to sell him, brilliant shop window for him, isn't it? Good regular appearances, time, so that comes into the mix. So nothing's happening with Quansah until that's finished, which is right at the end of June, I think it is. So early July into that one. Konate, as we said, you almost feel, and we don't know for definite, but you almost feel that the club want to get to the point where, are we renewing or can't we do this deal? And then we'll make a call on what we do, as in run it down, sell, and go from there. So there's still a bit of work to be done on that. Joe Gomez as well, the other one. Again, it seems to have gone quiet on Joe Gomez, but I kind of get it a little bit. I adore Joe Gomez as a player. He seems obviously a great guy, but I like him as a player and what he does. Think, a good, honest pro. What club right now would take a big gamble on Joe Gomez with his injury record and how he's just ended the season injured as well? You can't imagine they're all going. What I mean by that, and I adore him as a player, so it's not being derogatory. I could well imagine that Joe Gomez is almost people's plan C or plan D, if that makes sense. That was a bit of the, the info that we had around him. So there is big question marks. around a lot of our centre-backs. And I do think that is one that everyone expects us. I expect us, as we both do, to make a move eventually. But things are going to have to play out a little bit into window 2 for anything to be decided.
I think so, and that's actually the perfect segue to move into the Premier League chat in general, and starting with Newcastle United, who are a club who have been linked with both Joe Gomez and Jarell Quansah, but they are also doing other bits. And Eddie Howe's flexing his muscles a little bit after winning his latest power struggle battle. You got to say, I didn't see it coming. This guy has surprised me so much. I just credit where it's due. I did not see this coming. So, what's the latest with Newcastle in terms of business they're looking to get done?
Yeah, Newcastle have put quite a few lines about this out, and they're using this phrase specifically in their PR about there being quoted Saudi tax, because they know they're backed by the Saudis, that every player Newcastle go after, there's money added on, like in the old days, like it used to be with Chelsea and such. So they've quoted that. And because Paul Mitchell lost out in the power battle, we're almost back to Eddie Howe's targets from last summer. And on the screen there, they tried for him. Anthony Elanga didn't get him. So he's been linked now again, that Newcastle are trying to get that money done from the speedster for Nottingham Forest. João Pedro, another option at Brighton. But again, that's been down the list because they've not been able to get players like Mbeumo and others they were after. So that comes into the mix at the same time. Centre halves as well. Mark Gage, remember they spent all last summer messing around with Palace, that he's back on the radar for them as well. Konsa's been linked. And again, if Newcastle, who do like Quansah, are going to make a move for him, you just think almost now it'll have to be Gay to fall through again, or Quansah, to stick at Villa, that type of scenario. But it is interesting for a club that's in the Champions League and is Saudi backed. They're really struggling to do deals at the moment. So will be interesting to see who and if and when they land any of these players.
Yeah. You remember these rules? Aren't there supposed to be some rules about spending? I remember something about rules. But, I look forward to the latest Chelsea strategy around those rules and what they can possibly sell to themselves next week. Because Chelsea aren't really in our chat this week, so I just wanted to give them an honourable mention. Arsenal, however, are. And Arsenal have been linked with, certainly they were linked with Kerkez, less and less of that now, as Sesko seems to have taken over as the primary target for them. They made a very useful goalkeeping signing for Buttons. And like I said to you earlier on, they seem to be getting the run around by our friend Mountain Nonce, who has decided that maybe he's not 100% sure about all of this, and the summer's very long and you never know. So the Zubamendi thing might be not as real as they were hoping it was going to be. What is the latest with them? Because I know there's at least one more really high-profile link with them as well.
I tell you what, we don't blow our own trumpets often, as you know, but did we or did we not say when we started doing these on the lead up to the summer that when all the Arsenal Zubamendi stuff was coming up, just keep an eye on Real Madrid? That could be the one that trumps it all. And funnily enough, what are all the stories coming up at the moment? That Real Madrid are trying to make that move. So it is one to keep an eye. And it would be hilarious because Arsenal fans made all this noise, didn't they, about he turned you down, but we've got it. Like no one else was in for him this summer at all. We'd moved on, he'd moved on. But, it would just be hilarious if they fell flat on their face. And this one on the screen, Trev, Pepper, the Chelsea keeper, who was signed for, I think it was a world record at the time, wasn't it? 70-odd million, could now be going to Arsenal from Chelsea for about 5 million quid. That's just absolutely mental the way that's gone, hasn't it? And yeah, Gyökeres, as we said, seemed to be the one, but even Plettenberg's been speaking about it today, that he's actually said on German Sky Sports, fully expects Sesko to end up at Arsenal. That's what the suspicion is, around 80 to 90 million euros, which, famous last words, you never know what will come up. But considering everyone talked about Lego head needing to win now, and this was his last chance this season to really do it. A project forward is a hell of a gamble, which is exactly what Sesko is if that goes through. So it is interesting the nature of the business Arsenal are doing. There's nothing that really makes you think that's going to bridge the gap, does it at all?
Not at all. And the more struggles that Lego has for himself, the better I will be feeling. United, we know, need to do a few bits. I'm not sure I like the sound of some of the business that they're being linked with. They've made a good start with a fella who may be a dreadful set of lads by reputation, but is a very, very good footballer. They've already made that signing from Wolves. But they're also linked with Brian Mbeumo, aren't they? And everyone seems to be linked with Gyökeres. So what's the latest? Because we know there's a few boys very much on the outs there at United. And there are a few ways that they can look to make some money. Garnacho seems to be, schoolboy mortal enemies with Amorim. So what's happening there in terms of the latest with them on ins and outs?
Yeah, there's a few reports, isn't there, that Mbeumo has made it clear to Brentford that he wants to go to United. That's where he wants to go to, despite the involvement and interest from other clubs. We have to watch that. Yeah, Gyökeres to United seems to be gathering momentum. It just seems mad that we talked about Gyökeres and expected him to end up at one of Europe's big boys, didn't we? And all the clubs he's been linked with, to now maybe end up at United, who, let's be honest, aren't even in Europe next season. It just there's all these question marks. Why isn't Gyökeres wanted by all the big boys? It's interesting, isn't it? A little bit. So we'll see what happens there. But outgoings, I mean, I still can't believe that a few United journos are mentioning this. Inter Milan are still looking at Rasmus Højlund. I mean, God knows why. It's absolutely, he's been a stinking in the Premier League. And I know people will say he's young, but, maybe they're seeing something I'm not. And yeah, Garnacho. I mean, United are still just touting around the Ritalin kid, aren't they, to be honest? I think they just want to get as much money as they can for him as possible. But it's just bizarre again, isn't it? You just wonder how United's business is going to work out, because it's clear, despite the PR, the massaging, they wanted Bruno to go to Al Hilal, didn't they? They wanted to get that 100 million plus bag in, and then they could make moves and try and do what they could. So I am just intrigued how this all pans out in the long run.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. And I don't think the comedy is over there yet, which is lovely. Spurs have pulled off what could be considered the biggest dick move of the summer so far, with everybody's mate getting the sack. And it looks like, after the excitement of making the move to Brentford, that now Thomas Frank may be about to abandon ship there and go and join Spurs, which I don't know what I think about that, just purely from a professional perspective from him. You look at how some of the big managers have gotten on there.
Yeah.
It hasn't gotten well. And if I recall correctly, it was only a couple of weeks, maybe a month, when Ange was in front of the microphones, seeming really disillusioned with the state of things at Spurs and what it was that the reality of his existence was going to be. So, Thomas Frank, man, I'm not sure that's a great move for you. But they are still being linked with some big players, including the aforementioned Mbeumo, and everyone seems to be linked with Branthwaite at Everton.
Yeah, you look at the managers that failed under Daniel Levy, the coaches, haven't you, like Conte, Mourinho, all the experience in the game. I like Thomas Frank. He comes across as a nice guy, doesn't he? A decent guy when he does interviews, like a good, solid football guy. And I get why he's doing this, because it's a Champions League club and it is a step up. But like you, I think long term, you probably see this, or anyone under Daniel Levy, going one way, in all honesty, which is a bit of a shame. And it's funny that as this is coming out, a lot of the reports are that De Zerbi, do you remember the former Brighton one who went to Marseille? He turned it down as well. So that's a shame because De Zerbi's a bit unhinged. So that could have been a bit funny. But Thomas Frank, it looks like it will be. We expect this to happen. And also the reports, as you mentioned a few there, that Thomas Frank wants to take Mbeumo with him, has told him to hold off on the United front and, maybe make that move. And then even there's a couple more come out in the last few days. You mentioned Jared Branthwaite, he's being targeted by Spurs from a move for Everton. And then even tonight, as has come up on Sky and a few others, Tottenham also looking at Antoine Semenyo at Bournemouth as well. So it will be interesting. I think we expect Frank to go over there, who he targets, or actually, how much is he even involved in the recruitment? I get why he's doing it. It's a Champions League club. It's a step up. But I like Thomas Frank. And I think we all know how it ends up under Daniel Levy eventually.
Also, can you imagine the head on poor Queven Keller? I mean, he gets his move and then it looks like the whole thing is just sort of falling apart on him. Anyway, the rest of the Prem then, a few bits and pieces involving Bournemouth and Brighton and a few other clubs. I'll let you wrap this up. A lot of people very, very impressed with Manchester City's incredibly restrained spending of only X amount of millions to get in the likes of Reinders, and it looks like Ait Nouri as well. So to be fair, there's a few bits and pieces left to tie up here.
Yeah, the Club World Cup teams, City are a full foot to the floor, aren't they? That Nouri's now done. That was confirmed in the last hour, waiting for the confirmation over Cherky and Reinders. So, yeah, that resourceful and plucky Manchester City, who spent 200 million in the January window, are about to spend about 200 million in window one. I wonder what might be happening to them or what might we find out in the future. We'll have to see on that one. Chelsea are, interestingly, the opposite. They're trying, but they seem to have stalled on Ekitike because, funnily enough, they've realised that Frankfurt won't budge on that price, as we said before, because they're in a strong negotiating position there at the same time. We've talked about Mangan, the keeper. They're still trying to do that deal to get a seventh keeper through the door from AC Milan there as well. And even this one is still ongoing. They're trying to sort that Jamie Gittins, aren't they? It is interesting because if they want them for the Club World Cup, Chelsea have got a shed load of business to do in the next 24 hours, literally the next 24 hours, haven't they, to match City and get these players through the door. So I'm intrigued to see what happens on that one. Other sort of Premier League news, Bournemouth, Trev, they're getting absolutely gutted, aren't they, by the looks of it? Huijsen gone, you expect Kerkez to end up at us. And now Zabiani's told them, and understandably, he wants PSG. Greatest respect to Bournemouth. Why wouldn't you want to go to PSG for a bigger wage, that contract, the European champions? So their defence could just be absolutely gutted by the end of this window. So that's another one to keep an eye on. And then Brighton. Brighton just sign weird and wacky players, don't they? They love a forward from anywhere, Brighton. And they signed Zimas, that player that we talked about, that we looked at one time. Yeah. And now they're after another Greek forward who, I'm not going to try and pronounce his name, but let's just say he's worth about 87 at Scrabble, in all honesty, from Olympiacos. So that one is in the mix. And then I saved these Machiavellian stories because I know you love them, Trev, and I know you love a little bit of drama in the Premier League. And this is Forest and Palace and their owners. So Palace have John Textor, that American who also owns Botafogo, and Leon as their secondary owner. Forest have that mad Greek, Mavropanos, don't they, in charge there. Now, they teamed up. Do you remember we talked about last week that because he needed to raise funds, Forest were buying 3 players from Botafogo. Do you remember that? To help them and give Textor a little bit of cash so he could move it around. And in return, Forest were selling 2 players to Leon dirt cheap, Danilo and Matt Turner, the goalkeeper. A good little relationship between the Forest owner and the secondary owner of Palace. And how's it spilled out this week? The Forest owners knifed him in the back big trouble because having teamed up, Forest have now written to UEFA saying, why can Crystal Palace be in like the Europa League with their ownership situation? So having pretended to be his mate and done deals like this, the Forest owner has knifed John Textor in the back, big style while he's down. So we just love these little subplots that rear the head. And then the other thing to mention is the Premier League lost its case against Chelsea and selling assets. So whatever happens at the end of this window, Chelsea can still sell their second 7 netball team to clear the debts to themselves at the end of it.
It's just fantastic. I mean, I won't lie to you. I almost admire the fucking gall and the way in which they managed to just keep getting away with it. You could say that them's the breaks, and if you can get away with it, hats off. So it's interesting. It's going to be very interesting to watch those. That's a tremendous little bit of scandal. Love all that. I'm still hoping for a pyramid scheme story before the end of the summer as well, because we love a pyramid scheme.
Trev. I love it when these shows. Mo Mohammed's got it, and it's just flashed up on mine. Don't know if it's true, but as Ben Jacobs has reported tonight, who does seem to get a lot of Saudi news as well, Al Nassr are prepared to offer 85 million euros plus for Luis Diaz. And maybe even there might be a few developments in the near future. Oh,
that's exciting. But again, does Luis Diaz want to move 85 million? But anyway, look, I like it. Anything that breaks in the show is good. So thanks for bringing us that. Who was that? Sorry, who was it brought us that news?
Mo Mohammed there. Shout out to Mo.
Thanks, Mo. Fair play to you, man. Right. We'll move to Europe in the last few minutes here. And I think it's only fitting that we finish with the Saudi talk because it's kind of connects us back to the very start. So let's do the Zubamendi story, move to Bayern, and then go to Saudi. So the first thing is the Mastantuono and Zubamendi stories. We've kind of touched on the latter, but what's the latest that's happening with both of these?
Yeah, Mastantuono is just expected, isn't he? That's going to be announced at some point. Real Madrid have won the battle for the wonder kid, and it is intriguing to see how he does because he is a wonder kid. Liverpool had a good look at him as well, but Real Madrid have trumped PSG, so another superstar youngster, South American through the door at the Bernabeu. And now, as we said, this one, it would just be brilliant that all of a sudden Real Madrid do seem in, as we mentioned many moons ago, for Martin Zubamendi. And to be honest, I actually am getting to the point where if I was any big club, how flaky is Mountain Nonce, as we've said? The amount of clubs he's turned down, like Bayern Munich, Barca before, messed us around, looked like Arsenal. I mean, this would be like the 5th club he's messed around. And I'm not saying he's clearly a talented player. He's a Spanish international and all that. But if he didn't go to Arsenal, I mean, we'll rub it in, don't get me wrong, but Arsenal have already got about 87,000 defensive midfielders anyway, haven't they, a little bit? It's not really what they need, but it would just be funny if Real Madrid did this just to watch the meltdown on AFTV or wherever else it took place.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely it would. You don't wish anything good for Real Madrid, but at the same time, maybe it's exactly what they deserve too. And he'll be pining for his mountains within 6 months there as well. The other story then is Bayern. And we saw them do some very interesting jiggery-pokery with the Ta move. But there's more going on there as well. We know the Sané situation was complicated. And is there a Rafael Leao link too?
Yeah, I think Liverpool almost set the template for this, didn't they? When they managed to squeeze that 10 million out of Real for Mr. 66 to move on. Other clubs went, hold on. Yeah, we want money if you want our players before then, because we know you've got the money from the tournament. So Yeah, a few German clubs have got it. Leverkusen have got the best part of a couple million for Jonathan Tah, so he'll be going to the Club World Cup. But also, as reported today, Hoffenheim have got about 500,000 for Tom Bischoff, the other player that's going to go to the Club World Cup early. So they've managed to get a little bit of Bayern's millions there. Liverpool have set the precedent for that, so that's worked well. You mentioned, Leroy Sané. I mean, it looks like almost he's going to play in the Club World Cup for them. And then as it stands, move on a free. And the club that's actually brought the most money to the table at the moment is Fenerbahce. They've made a massive move for him on a free transfer. You just wonder what's going to happen with him because Tottenham have been in as well at the same time, Arsenal linked, but it's Fenerbahce that have got the biggest offer for him on the table. I mean, no one really knows if he fancies or favours that. Kingsley Coman, definitely set to go. Again, one that'll probably go to the Club World Cup unless a move's made for him. In the meantime, we'll have to see on that. And then you mentioned it. Bayern are clearly looking at a left winger. I mean, Gakpo's been linked, haven't they, on the screen there? They're trying apparently for Nico Williams, the Spanish international at Bilbao, who's just been a key part of their Nations League runner-up. And Rafa Leao also linked as well. It's quite clear that Bayern Munich are wanting another winger, but trying to get that in is proving difficult. And what's also becoming clear with all this haggling, the way they're trying to do things, Bayern Munich never had the money for Florian Wirtz in the first place, did they, Trev? That's all becoming clear. And Liverpool, you kind of feel, knew that all along, as did Leverkusen as well. Hence this, haggling to the top price and what they're trying to do. But it is interesting to see how Bayern's business will unfold. There's a lot to do at the Allianz before the summer's out.
If the Wirtz things happens, whether sooner or later, and Kerkez too, I'm going to come on here and direct everything at Manchester City and Bayern Munich fans and do my Daniel Day-Lewis impression where I say, I drink your milkshake, because that would be just fantastic. I mean, talk about actually just stealing their lunch. It would be tremendous if we get both of those guys that we're linked with over the line, because for all the weird virtue signaling that's going on about City and their sensible business, as you said, completely ignoring the last window and every other fricking window. I just think we have an opportunity here for this team of ours to get better. And that's what people need to keep in mind. With that, we just have one story left, and that's to go back to the underlining theme of the show so far. And it's been there from the beginning and it's here at the end, which is the general madness around the Saudi League. We've already mentioned the Osimhen thing, but you can maybe go into a little bit of detail about that because that was quite interesting. Why not? Gyökeres links there too. Theo Hernandez, of course, a very highly rated footballer. They're going to be looking at all of those. João Pedro, I know, is being linked. Walk us through just the general craziness of the names that are being credibly linked with a move. And if we're being honest, if it's going to be to one of the World Club Cup clubs, then it's going to have to be very soon.
Yeah, it's going to have to be in the next 24 hours, isn't it? And they are fully to the pump now. Simone Inzaghi's in. And I mean, the Osterman thing, and shout out to, he's on the screen there, Bucci-Laba, who had all this info and was well ahead of all the journalists. He's interviewed Osterman before, clearly the most reliable from his camp. When others were reporting, it's important to say this, others were reporting, Osterman, here we go, it's done, etc. Bucci-Laba was saying, no, he's not agreed to it. And as it was reported there, had the exclusive on it, 5 offers, Trev.
Wow.
5 offers they made to Osimhen. And in fact, as Bucci-Laba said, from where Al Hilal started, they more than doubled the offer to him. That, Osimhen's turned down the best part of £750,000 a week to go there because he wants to stay in Europe. I mean, that's just absolutely insane, isn't it, for negotiation? And they've started looking quickly, haven't they? They've sounded out Gyökeres. Doesn't seem like he's keen at all as well. João Pedro's been sounded out, it's reported. We'll have to see if that bears weight, I mean, Brighton would love to sell João Pedro for that cash, wouldn't they, to Saudi and get that banked. We know how Brighton operate. They would be absolutely ecstatic with that one. And there's been other no's. Theo Hernandez at AC Milan, he said no to them as well. Angelino looks like he's going to say yes, the former City player, the left back at AS Roma. So it's one of those where he's a good player, but a left back from Roma doesn't quite breathe the sexiness I think that they're looking for, does it really, in all honesty, at Al Hilal? But they're still trying to move. The only other things to keep an eye on, because we mentioned Al Nassr as well. Ronaldo came out last night after that Nations League final and said, yeah, I'm going to stay there. I'm going to be staying at Al Nassr, because there've been question marks around that, hadn't it, and how it was going to be negotiated. If even talk, he would go to Al Hilal on a short deal for the Club World Cup, but he came out last night and said, no, I'm staying there. Al Nassr, it's interesting because we mentioned tonight Luis Diaz and them still being there. They've also contacted PSG over their winger, Kangin Lee, the one who came from Mallorca and is out of favour. So they're clearly looking for a left winger. And it's not just Diaz that's in the mix. That's important to mention. And even though he's left-footed and he plays on the other side, quite a few of the Saudi clubs are looking at Leon Bailey at Aston Villa. So there's a lot of expectation that will advance in the second window. But, I mean, long story short, Al Hilal are trying to do a madness in the next 24 hours, aren't they? They are just putting rucks of money up in front of people. And even if it's not Al Hilal, there's still other Saudi clubs, like we mentioned, trying to do big business with other clubs. So it will be interesting to see how much gets done in the next 24 hours, but also how much does the Saudi money change the landscape this summer? There's a little bit of uncertainty, isn't there, around that? But makes our job interesting. It's definitely one to keep an eye on all summer.
Now, we had some gremlins the last time, so we didn't get to do the show together. It's great to be back in tandem doing this one. And I will say out loud now, without worrying about putting you under pressure, that if anything does happen in those 24 hours, Dave and I will be back with you to talk it through for sure, even if it's only a short show. But hopefully you crammed enough information into your noggins there listening to us on this one. Thanks to Dave, as ever, for putting that together, sourcing it all, checking it out, trying to stand up these stories that we hear. And that's all they are until they're not. So hopefully you enjoyed it. We've enjoyed having you. Thanks for all your comments. Thanks to the super chatters. We'll talk to you soon.